Been a tough year being a property investor? Rising interest rates got you second guessing? Not sure who to turn to for help? You need to reach out to Australian Property Scout, one of Smart Property Investment's most trusted buyers agency. Director Sam Gordon has personally helped many SPI show listeners invest to reach their financial goals using his purpose-built strategies. So what are you waiting for? Head to www.australianpropertyscout.com.au and book in a call with us today.
This is a Momentum Media production.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
G'day, how you going? Phil Tarrant, host of the Smart Property Investment Show. Hope you're well. As we near the end of the calendar year, everyone's getting set for a bit of a break and recharge over the Chrissy period, myself included. Good chance for me to go through my property portfolio spreadsheet and make sure it's all up to date. I'm trying to do some financing at the moment, and a whole bunch of documents I've got to get together, and I haven't looked at it for some time. So that's going to be my summer project to get all that sorted out, and I'll be sharing a lot of that journey as I go through a refinance of parts of the Smart Property Investment portfolio. I'll share that with you using the good people over at Finney Mortgage to help me out with that stuff, to get it all reset, repriced, maybe shave a little bit off my interest rates, which are all principal and interest at the moment. I want to go back to interest only, try and cover the spread during this period of rising rates. What's going to happen in 2023, who knows? Probably a few more to go till we get to the top of the rate curve, and then hopefully a period of stabilisation and coming down towards the end of the year. But don't worry, we'll be covering that. So do not fret, but maybe a good time for yourself to get going at a good portfolio review. Good time to do it when you've got some time off, getting the right headspace to do so. So look forward to those podcasts coming up as I go through the process of refinancing in a much tighter lending environment. And I'm not really looking forward to it, but luckily I've got a good mortgage broker to help me out with that stuff. So otherwise I wouldn't do it too hard. Anyway, it's not why I'm here today. I'm here today to chat to a property investor, but in a interesting way. He's brought along his buyer's agent, and you might know this buyer's agent, Paul Glossop. He's the heads up Pure Property Investment. So I'm going to get really interrogate a relationship between a client and a buyer's agent. Let's see how well these guys get on, whether or not this particular investor is happy with Paul Glossop over at Pure Property Investment, what works, what hasn't worked, whether or not this journey's been a good one and a productive one. And it's good that our guest is coming on and is happy to get naked, show us warts and all, exactly what's under the cover. Paolo Franceschini. Did I get that right, Paolo? Franceschini.
You've done a great job. Great
Really?
job. Yeah.
Where's home originally for you, Paolo?
Well, I'm Melbourne. I'm
Yeah,
born and bred in Melbourne, but my parents are dad's from Tuscany and mum's from Abruzzo, which is centre and South Italy.
okay. The Italians like property, don't they?
They do.
Yeah.
They do. And that's where I got my psychology behind property as well.
Did you really? Like, when were you first introduced to property?
So basically my grandfather came out after the war. He worked in a foundry, and then he bought a property, built it, bought the next door, built it, bought the next door, built it. So I've been around property all my life. And then Dad has progressed that even further, and to have a portfolio now. And I think from memory, their portfolio, my grandfather's passed away now, but their portfolio is about 23, 25 properties strong.
Wow. And probably all paid with cash, no doubt.
All paid off with cash.
I don't want to stereotype, but
all under the mattress.
yeah.
And all paid off in cash in the good old days.
And what do they reckon about you? So you got a few properties, and we'll get stuck into that today. You don't mind using a bank, or you still like the cash?
No, unfortunately, I got to use the bank. Yeah, different these days.
But what is it? You know, and I've got great affinity with Italians. A lot of really good Italian friends, and sort of having grown up with Italians, and you know, getting a sense for the culture. It's a great culture that you have. But what is it with Italians and property? Like, you just seem to own most of Sydney, at least.
Yeah, it's the same thing here in Melbourne. I think it's the tangibility of it. And they love the fact they can drive by it. And, you know, my father is retired now. He gets onto the phone every day and rings the real estate agents that look after it. Oh, the grass is a bit long over there. Can you tell them to do something? I think that sense of control, especially considering a lot of them after World War II lost everything. So I think they've come out here and they've thought property is the way to go. And it's paid dividends for most of them, I could imagine.
Yeah, and it sounds like a great migrant story, and that's the story of Australia. Post World War II, We've had it subsequent to that with different people calling Australia home who have been sort of displaced through war and other sort of conflict. And they're great stories, and it's good to see that's still thriving as it is right now. And you're the third generation property investor, Australian property investor.
Yep.
How big's your portfolio compared to the granddads? You're sort of you're getting there slowly but surely.
I've got 8. So
8.
I'm on 8. Dad's probably about 24, 23, 24.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't think I'll get to 23, 24, but yeah.
What sort of stuff's your old man got, if you don't mind sharing it?
He's got units, but it's the old-fashioned standing alone unit, built on top of each other with a garage next to it. We just built a triplex, which I had a big hand in that. He's got commercial property. He's got dual ox. It's mostly residential, but there's a few good commercial in there as well.
So he's done it the old-fashioned way, probably by himself, hard graft, not drawing on a bank too much. You've done it in a more modern sense and a more accessible sense for most Australians, leveraging debt in order to sort of get you in the property. But you've also, which is more of a modern sense, is using a buyer's agent, Paul Glossop. What's your old man think about that? You're doing it all wrong?
No, he loves Paul.
Does he?
Yeah. When I first used Paul, he would come out to me and we'd go through all the properties together, and especially the first one, which is in Melbourne. And then when he brought the first one we bought in 2016, I think, we walked out of that viewing. We both go, yeah, this is the one. And Dad goes, look, you can trust this guy now. He knows what he's doing. Okay. Which, to be honest, for an Italian to say that, it's a big deal.
I don't know. He must have charmed him somehow because did he have to work hard to gain the old man's trust? It sounds like you warmed to Paul pretty quickly, but did he try and catch him out at all?
No. Dad's being a business person, he just looked at the figures.
Mm.
Yeah, and then when we saw the caliber of the property we got the first time, he was like, yeah, let's go, which was good.
Well, it's the right way to look at property, and we'll drill down that today. So, sorry, Pal, you said 8 properties in your portfolio, is that right?
Yeah, 8 at the moment, yeah.
Okay, so I think to give us and I know our listeners really enjoy this as well, I'll use that, we'll go sequential through your property portfolio because people absolutely love talking about property. But if you can give your insights into the why, wet, how, lessons learned along the way as we sort of break down your portfolio, I think that will work. We'll sort of lean on Paul he can give us some sense for some of the details around it. How would you describe your sort of philosophy to property, Paolo, or your strategy investing property? No doubt that's changed over the years.
I'm a cash flow guy. It just has to make sense cash flow wise. I think a lot of young property investors overlook that. And, I gained a lot of motivation from Robert Kiyosaki and other people that really state that it's the cash flow. And so once you understand the language of money that comes with property, then you can begin to make some decisions based on some really good cash flow forecasting. So that was my philosophy. And that was when Paul bought the first property for me in Melbourne, that's what I said to him, has to be cash flow positive. And back then I didn't have the extra amount of money to put in if it wasn't. And that's still my philosophy now. The last couple of properties I bought from Paul, it had to yield over 6%. Or else I'm not interested. So
on that basis, then you probably have to shift up the type of assets in your portfolio. And it's okay. It's okay being cash flow orientated. And for those listeners who are not too sure what that means that after you pay everything connected with the owner of the property, you still got money in your back pocket. So that's the easiest way to view it. Do you think though, Paolo, you've compromised capital growth by chasing cash flow, or have you sort of got that perfect sort of storm of these two things? Sort of you're getting both of them together.
Well, it's how do you know? Because when I look at property, it had to have the 6% yield. And, yes, you can get capital growth by sitting on it, but that's an unknown. Who knows what's going to happen? But with cash flow, the figures are there, and then you're actually going to know, right, I'm going to have $500 a month extra. And I just put everything back onto the loans. So not only am I increasing my cash flow position, I'm reducing my debt and increasing my capital position by just putting it back.
That's sort of getting quite tactical, Pal. You do that by way of offsets, or you actually put into the principal?
No, offsets.
Offsets, okay. Sorry, Paul.
No, I was going to mention that point a touch earlier, Phil, but you beat me to it, mate, is that I think too often, and Paolo, you mentioned, so often, especially would-be investors or people who are sort of trying to start to build a portfolio think, I have to choose, is this a growth asset or is this a cash flow asset? And I'm not going to sort of give away the surprise that we're going to work towards on how this portfolio is eventuated over time, but you genuinely can achieve both. And I think your portfolio, Paolo, is not buying a whole bunch of properties in one area and essentially riding one wave and being very lucky, we'll get to that point of it's a very diverse portfolio in property types and price and locations. And the growth story is exactly that. If you select correctly at the correct time and you get the correct cash flow at that time, there's no reason why you can't get above average growth on those same assets. So I think that's something that is a vernacular that sometimes it's a bit of a marketing spin because, some people sell the fear of saying if you're going to get high cash flow, that means it's going to be garbage in growth, or because you wouldn't live in that particular location, that it's just not going to perform over the long term. I think too often it's that story or that narrative is set to essentially support someone's position. But the reality is that the facts will come down when we go through the portfolio a little bit more specifically, that you can certainly achieve both. So I know, Phil, in your portfolio, which you've got and built over the years, you've certainly achieved both over time as well.
Yeah, and when I sort of do a rehash on the portfolio over the sort of coming months, as I refinance it, capital growth's been great, and the portfolio, the smart property investment portfolio, doesn't owe us anything. We've got no money, and everything's sort of come back out of it. But cash flow could have been, the yielding position could have been better, but we've had to sort of compromise on holding stuff in trusts and all this sort of stuff, which is just the price of doing business. So again, it's a horses for courses type of thing. Have you always used Paolo, for your buying, or did you sort of give it a crack by yourself to start with?
Look, the first two properties I bought was life before Paul. And
you would have been a happier bloke back then, no doubt.
Oh, look, I didn't have kids, so it was a lot less stressful. So the first one, I probably didn't know enough what I was buying. And then the second one was the one my wife and I became one, more or less. I bought our one in super. And then I had a conversation with a real estate agent who, by the way, another great key is they love to talk. They are a plethora of knowledge, real estate agents. They are fantastic. They'll just talk your ear off and give you all the information you want. And so this gentleman I'd never met before, my mother-in-law put me on to him, and he said to me, you've done it wrong, and this is what you should have done, and this is how you should have done it. And so then I thought, and then he put me on, at the time there were two property magazines. I don't know if they're still around or not, but there were two of them.
No more property magazines.
No more. I know. And they were fantastic. The amount of knowledge I got from there was amazing. And then I remember ringing up all these different people that are on there, and because I'm in sales, they tried to give me the wholesale spiel, and I'm like, I don't want that. And that's why I liked Paul, because when I got to Paul, he wasn't trying to sell me anything. It was just like two mates having a drink and we were talking about our love for property. Then he said, look, this is what I could do for you. If you want, let me know. Let me see what I can find for you. And that's where the relationship started. Yeah,
it sounds like a relationship built in trust. And, we're very fortunate in Australia. There is, and it's a growing area. There's a lot of good buyers agents out there right now. But you need to make sure if you're going down a pathway of using a buyer's agent, I use a buyer's agent, you got to make sure you gel with them, right?
Yeah.
They might be technically proficient and capable, but, you've also got to be you got to get on well and have that relationship of trust, because if you are going to use a buyer's agent, and this is a message for all those people out there, you pretty much got to bear all, right? You can't lie to your buyer's agent, because they can't do their job effectively if you're telling them furfies around how much money you got and what you want to buy and how much you earn, all that sort of stuff. So it's got to be a relationship that gels. And I'd say that's the primary thing on the basis of something of skills. Paolo, I want to actually get into the 8 properties, and I think we've set ourselves up pretty well for it. We'll just go to a quick break. Stay with us, everyone. Back in a moment. Welcome back. It's Phil Tarrant. I'm the host of the Smart Property Investment Show, having a chat with a buyer's agent and his client, Paul from Pure Property, and Paolo, property investor. You notice I didn't try and tackle your last name again, Paolo. So 2 properties before you went down the buyer's agent route, and no doubt you were probably reading Smart Property Investment when it was a print magazine.
Yeah.
Back in the days. We transitioned 2015 to podcasting, and now we're getting, I don't know, nearly 250,000 people a month listening to this thing. So, mate, you're a celebrity now. So if you thought no one knew who you were, now they do. Most people know Paul. He's on it quite regularly. So property number 1, which you just bought when you went, I'm going to get in the property. What did you buy, mate? Tell us about it.
Oh, mate, I bought a student accommodation. Shoot me now.
Oh, yeah.
I bought a student
There's
accommodation.
your first mistake.
Yeah, I know, very much so. But, prior to, it cost me $95,000. It's in McLeod there in Victoria. And prior to, and again, it did fit my philosophy with cash flow, because prior to COVID, I was getting over $1,100 a month out of that.
Yeah, bet you were. But yeah.
But then they take 40% goes to this and that and this and that. So the net goes down considerably. But that was, I think I was just desperate to jump into the market. And again, this is where the education needs to come in. That desperation can, or I say 95,000, I've got it paid off.
You still have it? What sort of rent are you getting on it?
Yeah.
What are you getting on it now?
I don't like to sell if I don't have to. I'd rather do a cash out refinance, but it still yields. It still yields quite well for me.
What do you reckon it's worth now?
Oh, look, after COVID, you could give them away, but they've come back a bit. So, especially being in Victoria, it looks like about 120 grand. I think. I don't know. Paul will be better on that.
I don't know if I'd even call that a property. To be honest with you.
No, I know. Fair enough. Fair call. But it does yield me considerable yield. So I think that's a good little.
So what is like a studio, right? It's got a bed. And
it's got. I haven't been there in years. You go in and it's got a kitchen and it's got a little area where they watch television. There's a desk all along one wall, and then it's got a double bed in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just student digs.
Yeah, but it's never been vacant. There's always, even during COVID, it's always been rented. And I guess for me, again, if I put 95,000 into shares, what am I going to get?
At the moment, not a lot. You probably would have gone backwards. I don't want to talk about my short share portfolio. I'm going to have to. I've got a bad relationship with my share portfolio. How about you, Paul? How's your share portfolio? Bad relationship.
I think we've had a couple of chin wags on the side about this, and it's for me. It's
we've had some great picks lately.
Oh, fantastic! And it's a constant tertiary priced education, University of USA priced education to explain to me why stay in your lane, always stay in your lane.
In your lane. Okay, all right. So that was the first property, student accommodation. What was the second property?
Second property is a 2-bedroom. Actually, the second property is a 2-bedroom unit in Frankston.
Okay.
And this one, I had a bit of help from a very good mate of mine who's a real estate agent. And I picked this one up and this one I picked up after reading the magazines. And it said that this area was about to blow. And so I got there and I think it was 291,500. And then within a 6-month period, it went to 450.
Yeah.
And so again, that's got
reading Smart Property Investment, giving you that hot tip.
Yeah.
We're in the business of tips.
It did. And the real estate agent helped me put in a very good bid. That's hence the 500, because he said everyone always goes to the nearest 1,000. And so that's been rented by the same bloke for the years I've had it. It'd probably be about, maybe 6 years, 7 years.
And sorry, what rent are you getting on it?
That one I'm getting, that's in my super. It's about 380.
Okay. And you're basing sort of your tell me, how do you base your yield? You base it on the purchase price or full establishment costs, or do you base it on market rent? How do you sort of view it? Because there's many different ways you can.
No, I do it on whatever the loan is, and then divide obviously whatever my rent is.
Okay, so you give you take a view of yield on the debt.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and what's that worth now? That property?
I think Paul would know this. I think it's about 525, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think it will take that 500K mark at this stage. I think it probably softened a bit during COVID just due to the demand of that, but I think it'll have a solid, especially rent-wise, it'll be very solid over the next 2 or 3 years as immigration turns the tap on again.
And I'm sort of picturing a sort of red brick down there in Frankston. Got that right?
Yeah, it's a huge it's a lot in the complex, but they're all freestanding with their own garages. And my one's got the property, the garage, and the other side is like a little parking lot area, so it's not attached.
So that's not a bad buy. You've done well out of it pre-using a buyer's agent. So what was the catalyst then to go?
Too much information. You just like, have I done the right thing? Have I made the right decision? I could have bought here and got more, or here and got more. It's just too much. And the amount of time that you would have to build what we've built, the amount of time that I would need to do it, I don't have it. I simply don't have it. And the buyer's agents have, and Paul has, I gather he has a great relationship with me. He would have a fantastic relationship with his real estate agents that he purchases from. And the fact that buyer's agents can, there's some properties here that we'll go through where a lady was going insolvent the next day, and we picked it up.
And that's the goal, right? Connectivity, accessibility to the properties that you wouldn't normally get is one of the big positives of using a buyer's agent. I've done that myself many times. Paying someone to do the heavy lifting and the work. They're better at doing what you are, and your time's probably better off spent making money. I think once people get beyond that mental hurdle of paying a fee for service, i.e. you're paying someone to do the work for you. Once they get beyond that, it's quite enlightening and empowering for them. But how did you sort of cover that thinking? I don't know what Paul charges, but I've sort of got a sense for what buyer's agents charge. It's not a small amount of money. Was it ever an issue for you, sort of going, oh, well, that's another cost of doing business?
No, because my understanding was very similar to yours. If I'm gonna try and do my own plumbing at home, it's going to be a disaster. So why wouldn't you just use a professional that specialises in this area, especially given the amount of money these things are and the fact they're non-liquid.
Mm.
You know, if you make a wrong turn here, one, perhaps you can get away with, but after that, it can be detrimental.
Well, what do you do for a living, Paolo? You said sales. What do you sell?
It's a family business, so the business will be 50 years next year.
Oh, wow.
But being an Italian, it's always a family business.
Yeah.
So we import amazing Italian jewellery and we wholesale it around Australia and New Zealand.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've
there
been.
You go.
73 was when my grandfather started.
They sort of, you keep asking for more money. They give you a pay rise every now and then, or you know that. Well, you got 8 properties. You must make a few bucks, I imagine.
Look, it's okay.
It's okay. Getting by.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
But if I need some jewelry, I know where to go now, right?
Absolutely. I'll do a special deal.
Mate, this is the great thing about doing this podcast. My Rolodex of contacts just keeps growing. Now, can you be my jewelry guy? I've got a guy normally for everything. I got a guy.
As soon as you step in the mud with your missus, come to me and I'll help you out.
So tell me about the first property that you bought using a buyer's agent, Pure Property. Just run us through the process. How did you get, we'll talk about the property itself, but how did you get to the buying of the property? Did you sort of assess, did Paul interrogate your strategy, what you're trying to achieve, how you're going to get there and work it up that way? Can you tell us about that journey?
I said to Paul, look, after I decided, yep, here's the one I want to go with, which was a very, and I know he's on the podcast and I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but it was a very easy decision for me. Paul's very personable. He knows his stuff. He loves to chat. I still ring him now about property just to have a chat.
Does he take your calls?
Yes, sucked in.
Really? Mate, he's impossible to get a hold of.
No, he's very accessible for me. And so the first property I said to him, look, I don't know you, you don't know me. Being Italian, that's a big thing. I need you to buy Melbourne and I need you to be cash flow positive, which at the time was a task in itself, given the yields on Melbourne properties are pretty low.
Mm.
And so then I remember we went to one property, wasn't it, Paul, at St Albans, which was in Melbourne's west.
Yep.
And we missed out on that, which I'm grateful we missed out on that. And then we went to this place in Laverton. And so Laverton was probably my first one winning Paul. I think we bought it in 2016. And as soon as I walked out with Dad. We both said, yeah, this is the one. And so the beauty about Laverton, and I hope no one from the council is listening to this, it has a bungalow. And so being in Victoria, it's frowned upon to be able to do what I've done, but I've put a 6-foot fence around the bungalow and I've rented them out separately.
So a bungalow being a granny flat. Right?
Well, yeah, but not
sort of. Yeah.
Not an auxiliary.
An auxiliary dwelling, is that the legal term for it? An auxiliary dwelling?
Well, the legal term is a sleep out.
A sleep out.
Yeah,
okay.
Right. That's. I had a frank discussion with the council there, and that's what they just described it at. But the beauty about that, obviously, gives me.
So it's all kosher, right? Like you're allowed to rent that, so that's all sweet, right? That's cool. So it's a house with an additional dwelling on it.
Well, it's a separated.
It's a separated. Okay.
Yeah.
So how much you pay?
$425.
$425. 2016. What's it worth now?
I think it's worth. Lena told me it was worth a bit more, Paul, but I've got it at $650.
Yeah, I think it'd be pretty conservative at $650. But I think, if we talk about what the rent is on that property, any investor would say, okay, great, I'm holding a freestanding asset in the west of Melbourne.
Yeah,
I think your 700 would be pretty comfortable these days, irrespective of where the market trends are going, because people are going to buy it on the cash flow regardless at this point.
Yeah, and it's got an 8 frontage, so I can put potentially 3 on there down the track.
So it's got an upside on it. What? How much debt you holding on it?
None. It's paid off.
Okay. Well, it's better than all right. That's not bad going.
Yeah.
So the student accommodation paid off. The 2-bed in Frankston paid off.
No, Frankston's not paid off. Frankston's got 170 on it.
It's got 170K. Okay. Laverton paid off. Tick.
Yep.
Let's talk about property number 4.
Ooh, number 4. I think I don't know if Paul's got it there. I don't know if it was Bridgewater or Baldock Park. We'll do Baldock Park. Baldock Park is a 2-bedroom unit in West Brisbane in Baldock Park. So Redbank Plains, Baldock Park.
Okay.
This was the one where the lady, I think from what Paul told me, if I can remember, went insolvent the next day. So we were able to pick that up.
Distressed sell.
Yeah, the poor dear. We picked that up for 185 grand.
The poor dear, he says with a smile on his face, 185 grand.
Yeah.
Someone has to buy it. It was going to be someone, and we made sure we were the someone.
Yeah.
You know what? Like, that's a really good point, because property investors sometimes get sort of packaged up as this ruthless people, preying on other people's misfortune. Well, guess what? Someone's going to buy it. May as well be someone who's actually buying it for rental accommodation and can put people into to help with that sort of scenario. So I wouldn't get too worried about that. So 185 grand, 2-bedroom unit, rented out at what, Paolo?
At the moment, it's 325.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah. And look, just a word of warning too, I had a terrible agent there, and they cost me a lot of time and energy. So the importance of getting a very good managing agent, it's imperative. And now that's changed. I've got someone who's phenomenal.
When and how did you work out they were dud?
Oh, they were just, I don't want to swear, mate, but they were just like,
Well, tell me about how were they bad, though? Because it just gives some clues to other people.
They didn't do their job. They weren't collecting rents. They weren't communicating. Yeah, they were terrible. And, I actually gave them half a star on Google. I couldn't give them none, or would have given none. But they were just, and then I spoke to the head guy there, and he goes, yeah, promise the world. And then I'm like, this is my kid's future here. Stop stuffing me around. So I quickly left there, and I found a good one that I've been with ever since.
Very good. Any debt on the property?
That one, that got, I don't know, but what I've done is I've got them all in one. I'll tell you how much debt overall, because they're not all separately. I haven't got statements for each one. They're all,
okay. All right. We'll go into sort of portfolio position later on. Yeah. Let's talk about property number 5, Paolo.
Your number 5 is my little crown in the jewel, apart from Leverton, and Paul did a great job on this one. This is in Bridgewater in Tasmania. Now, we bought that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I'll let you jump into the details. But I was just going to say, this is one of those classics where, to your comment and discussion earlier in the piece, where you said talking about, do you sacrifice growth for cash flow? This is an example as to you can certainly have both if you select correctly, correct time, correct asset.
Sorry, just before you get into this Bridgewater property, Paul, question for you. At 185K for that Bellevue Park, was that under market value? Was it just a quick distressed sale? How did you find the place?
Yeah, we bought quite a bit in that general vicinity in that area. So we had some good relationships knowing well. I personally had investments in that market, and we invested for a number of clients. That was one of those scenarios where you got a quick phone call saying, this is going to be a mortgagee as of next week. So we either have a chance to buy it now before it becomes a mortgagee. And as you probably no doubt know, Phil, once it becomes a mortgagee, it goes through more rigor, and it has to be sold under a certain circumstance, and it goes through a whole process. Now, this is an opportunity to get it done, and also avoided a whole bunch of issues with the actual owner of the property going through the insolvency process, which obviously will affect them quite dramatically for future borrowing. So the agent knew that they weren't going to get the sale if it went to a mortgagee. So they knew that there was incentive for them to get a bit of commission. So they called us saying, here's the numbers, here's what they'll take. Comps were well and truly into early to mid 200s. So we knew we certainly had probably 20, 30, 40K below what it would likely sell for on the open market. And it was obviously fit the scenario and the strategy that Paolo was after. So it was one of those quick ones, which was built on probably 2.5 years of relationships prior to, from an agent who gives a phone call, gives a scenario. We do our comparables. We look at the data and we're like, yep, it makes sense.
Yeah. And it sounds as though whoever owned that probably got some good counsel around that, just to maybe take a small haircut, but alleviate a lot of problems into the future by clearing out any unwanted debt. So 5 in Bridgewater in Tasmania. Where is Bridgewater? I'm not too sure on geography on that.
Bridgewater, because for work I go to Tassie a bit. If you're coming out of the city, you kind of turn left and you kind of you keep right and follow the freeway, the main freeway there. And then it's just after, there's a kind of a little bridge that goes over a very small amount of water, and then you tip left. So the beauty about Bridgewater, and Paul and I had this discussion, it was known as a pretty dodgy part of Tassie, but where we bought was the new part. And then as it goes through this gentrification, it's slowly become a very nice place to live. In fact, the guys that rented from me, they've been there since I've had it.
Sounds pretty good. How much you pay?
I paid $215.
Okay. It's a freestanding house?
Freestanding house. Now, the house was only 2 years old because, again, this goes back to the point. They just built it, and then the gentleman got sick with cancer.
That's not good.
Yeah, so he had to. They had to sell.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, tough situation for them, no doubt.
Yeah.
Just remind you, and I imagine you were pretty active down there in 17, 18 by memory, Paul. So around that time, 16, 17, 18. $215,000. You couldn't build a house for that now anywhere in Australia. Yeah. Good luck. So it's in good nick. You've got depreciation benefits, no doubt. Your accountant would have sorted that out. What's a renting out for at the moment?
Ooh, that one I'm getting $380 a week.
Okay, cool. All right, so that's yielding pretty well as well. Let's get into these last two properties. We'll just go to another break. Stay with us. Back in a moment.
Want to slash thousands off your home loan repayments? Whether you're an investor or homeowner, we know how important it is to find the lender that suits your unique situation and with the best rate. If you've not compared your home or investment loan in the last 12 months, you may be able to cut your repayments today with a different lender. That could mean more money in your bank account and less stress when it comes to paying your loan. Find out why more borrowers are turning to Finny to refinance their home loans. Call us now on 1300 002 023 and find out what you could save, or visit our website finny.com.au to book an appointment.
Welcome back, Phil Tarrant from Smart Property Investment with Paul and Paolo, chatting through Paolo's journey. Property Investor 8 portfolio. We don't yet know the total amount. We'll leave that to the end. But tell us about property number 7, Paolo.
Just before we do 7, Bridgewater now is at 450.
Okay. All right.
This is where our point is that Paul and I are making. You don't necessarily have to trace the capital growth to get it.
So that's doubled in 5 years, and you've probably been yielding, 6% on that. Yeah. Well, on the debt, yeah. Okay, it's not bad going. You happy with that result, Paolo? You okay that thing doubling? Yeah.
A state.
You don't seem too happy, mate. You haven't cracked a smile this whole podcast.
No. This is the portfolio. For me, that kind of yield is fantastic.
Yeah, it's good. And to my earlier point, and I questioned it whether or not you've compromised capital growth for chasing yield. And a lot of people will go down a pathway of a yield play if they don't necessarily have the income. And they've got to be really careful about watching every dollars and cents. And, they don't want to get into negative cash flow, because that means they're going to have to pony up money out of the salary and they can't afford it and all that sort of stuff, or they're worried about rate rises. So if you can get both, you cook them with gas. Number 6, is that where we're at?
1, 2, 3, 4,
yeah,
5.
Number 6.
5,
yeah.
aren't we?
5 was Bridgewater. So let's talk about property number 6.
6 was Noosaville. Noosaville is a commercial property.
Okay.
So basically what I did is when I had my principal place of residence, and I sold that because I met my wife and I moved in with her. And so then I used that capital just like they do in Monopoly. You go, $5 houses, 1 hotel. And so I paid Laverton off in full because it was my highest yielding. And then I went and bought a commercial property and I paid that off.
Okay, cash money.
Yeah, that one was cash. The good old Italian Bible.
Folding or bank transfer?
No, it was mate. It was the pineapples were out. Let me tell
you. You rock up with the bag. How much did you spend? What's your commercial property? Is it industrial?
It's a very small little warehousey thing. It's tiny. And I spent $160,000 on that. It's now worth about $330,000.
Okay.
Now Noosaville, the beauty about this one is it's in a complex of 4 or 5. 3 of them are owned by a mechanic. And so I've got the one next to him, and instead of parking in his cars everywhere, he uses mine to parking.
So yours is yours is parking garage, secure parking garage.
And he's offered it to buy it off me. So I secured a 5x5x5 lease with him. Which is
an option to sell if he ever needs it.
Well, I said, look, if I have to sell, I will. But at $160,000 paid off, it'll be very rare I would. But and so basically now, to get a 5x5x5 and $160,000, I know this is a bit different because it's residential commercial. It's unheard of.
And so he'd be covering all outgoings as well as paying you the rent. So this will be probably super yielding, right?
Yeah, that gives me $275, $300 a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Per week, and that's just straight cash money in your pocket.
Yep.
It's not bad going.
No.
It's going to be a good Christmas for the kids.
I try not to tell them too much, mate.
No. All right. That's smart play. Do you feel as though, you bought 160, it's at 330? Has it got much more in it in terms of capital growth? And the reason why I say that, you could park if you pull that 330 in equity there because it's got no debt on it and deployed that elsewhere, would you be getting more upside with it?
Potentially. I mean, it's how long's a piece of string, but I guess it comes to what my original goals were.
Mm.
And I like to start with the end in mind, and I had a position that I wanted to get to. Now we've well and truly surpassed that. Potentially I could do a cash out refinance on that because it's got a very strong lease. And, get, what they lend you, 70%. What's that, 270, 280 grand?
You do a lot of damage with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I could potentially put it into something else.
Something for you guys to talk about offline, no doubt.
Look, I'd love to, but my wife's already said to me the next one is our family home because we rent best. So, mate.
Fair enough. I don't get into marriage counselling. No. I know where my boundaries lie, and that's definitely not there. And I have no advice when it comes to that sort of stuff. Probably number 7, Paolo.
7 is Bundaberg.
Bundaberg. Okay.
Bought in Bundy, North Bundaberg.
Yeah.
That's on a quarter of an acre, I think, isn't it, Paul?
Old school 1,200 square.
Yeah. The house is beautiful. It's really well built. It's got the old kind of wooden floors that are built to last. And that one yields, I think it's got an update. It's about $320, $340 a week. What did we pay for that, Paul?
Sub 200.
Yeah, 185
for a freestanding house in Bundaberg.
North, yeah, Bundy North, outside of the flood zone.
What's it worth today?
Oof.
Can you still buy properties for $185,000?
This was only a couple of years ago, Phil. I guess that's the big thing to mention to people here is that, if you know where to look and what to look for, I mean, that property would be circa 300 these days right now. So you're talking pretty close to 60, 70% capital growth with another 7, 8, 9% yield.
Yeah, that's yielding well, 340 on a 185K purchase price. So these properties still exist, is the question.
Mm.
Yeah. All right, he's not going to tell us. Yeah, okay. Don't worry, everyone. I'll find out and I'll tell you. So check back next week, see what I can get out of these guys. Okay, let's talk about the last property, Paolo.
Last property we just bought this November last year. It was the most stressful purchase I've ever done because I had a terrible conveyancer. It was a commercial property in Portsmouth, which is just outside Cairns. Again, another lesson here is don't go skimpy on the conveyancer.
Yeah, and not that conveyancers are bad.
Mate, she was terrible. She actually cost me $1,500 because we missed out on settlement by day. All was well across this.
Yeah. You know what's worse than having a really bad conveyancer yourself is when the vendor has a really bad conveyancer. That's even worse because you can't really do a lot about it. At least if you've got a dud conveyancer, you can sort of cajole them in the right direction. But when you've got dud conveyancers on the other side, it's an absolute nightmare.
A very stressful purchase. Now, this was my biggest one by far. So this cost me 1.16.
God, that's a step up. Yeah.
Yep, step up. Being a commercial property, I was very hesitant with this because it is an office. But then we have the Australian Department of Defence as a tenant.
That's not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. Now, this is where people aren't educated. I bought it off a bloke who had just bought it, had just given them a shop fit, right? They just paid him back after 5 years. He's just put air conditioning on, and then he sold it to me. Why
was he selling it?
Oh, he goes, I can buy the farm next door and make more money. But when you sell it, you see how much went to the bank and how much he kept. He kept bugger all.
Mm.
And I'm like, why would you do that? Even with the Bundaberg, they actually sold it to us for less than what they bought it for.
All about timing, right? People typically only sell property if it's distress or debt or divorce or something else that starts with D. So, sometimes it's best not the question, right?
No.
Just gift horse and all that sort of stuff. So were you specifically looking for a commercial asset in Portsmouth, or was this just come up on your radar, Paul, with this brief?
Yeah, from our side of things, it certainly comes down to the strategy, the budget, and what we're looking for. And we could piecemeal a lot more commercial properties together to that total amount that we had as a budget with the intention that we wanted to get to a particular cash flow position. But as I think the three of us know, working in property and buying property and accumulating property, is that it's not the person with the most amount of property wins. It's the person with the best cash flow for the minimal moving parts wins. And sometimes you go low because that's what you've got to work with. But if you've got a bigger budget and to this point you get a defence tenant on an extremely long and sustainable lease with absolutely all outgoings covered, and you say, well, that's going to give us the solution that potentially 3 other assets would in accumulation. I mean, I saw myself out of work because we charge a flat fee, and I could say, let's just buy 3 properties to make it up, and I'll charge 3 fees. But Paolo and I, we're very open with our conversations in the sense that we knew this was going to do the job. This was the right property. The location was a little bit, especially with commercial, we become a little bit more probably benign with location, because ultimately we bought this purely for cash flow. The growth component was not really what we were trying to achieve there. However, Paolo will probably divulge a few numbers on what's happened from a growth perspective. The net yield we achieved from day one, and then the subsequent valuation after that proved that we got very good growth in a short period of time.
So what sort of rent you're getting on this now?
I get 78 a year.
78K. You bought it for 116, and you got it revalued recently?
Yes, I got it revalued, but I think it's gone up even since interest rates are going up. Everyone's chasing yield. So especially given the tenant, I bought it at 6.4 cap rate. I think now, I think Paul told me they're going for 5.5. So it's gone up to almost $1.5 million.
Okay. And is that, have you done anything with it? Did you guys secure the tenant? The tenant was really in there. Have you renegotiated the lease? It's just a natural uplift.
Yes, he after he refitted it to their specifications, because it's Department of Defence, he had to put special rooms in for the servers.
And who paid for the fit out?
Well, he did, the previous owner, and then they paid him back over a 5-year term.
Okay. So the government was paying back the fit out costs in the lease.
Over the 5-year term. So they've been there for, they've been there for a while. I mean, they've been in Cairns for 30 years. So
the military up there, they'll probably be a tenant for life, right?
Well, fingers crossed, yeah.
There's a good chance they pay their bills as well. So that's a good thing. Yeah. So where'd you get the cash for what sort of debt did you get?
I had 100% debt.
Okay.
Now I borrowed 1.16. Look, there's a few little tricks that I didn't know about with commercial. When you go through an agent, a broker on some of them, because it's commercial, they actually charge you the brokerage fee. So I got charged $8,500.
Yeah.
In like that. And then because I borrowed over $1 million, there was an additional fee on top of that. So I cracked it.
No, it's just a brokerage, it's what happens when a lot of this commercial stuff gets done.
So knowing this up front was probably where the gripe comes in, though, isn't it? As you prefer to say,
fair enough,
with your broker saying, look, I don't want to get these after I've already committed. You've got me over a barrel and I don't have a choice anymore. That's probably where the openness. And I, to be honest with you, a lot of brokers, because they don't deal with fees very often, they probably don't know until they know either. And unfortunately, I mean, it's not an excuse, but this is where good brokerage and good brokerage advice prior to signing contracts is also quite important.
Well, that's a stressful component, right? If you know, you can plan for it. If you don't know, you're on the back foot. So you've had to go out and sort of find a few more bucks around it. Just conscious of time, Paolo. So how large? What's the total aggregate value of your investment portfolio, not counted? You don't have a principal as a resident. So what's the total size in value?
We're just over the 4 million.
Okay. $4 million bucks.
My debt on the commercial property I bought now is down to 874,000.
Okay.
And the debt spread amongst the other 4 is about 555,000.
Okay, so about 1.7 million bucks in debt, thereabouts.
Somewhere like that, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a fair bit of equity in there.
Yeah, fair bit of equity in there. Yep.
Are you happy with the equity position?
Absolutely.
2.5 million plus, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
What are you going to do with it?
What am I going to do with it? I am going to...
Simple question. What are you going to do with it?
I had a discussion with Paul. We could potentially build here or build there, but with the price of building at the moment, it's an absolute joke. And why would I chuck tenants out when they're paying and the properties are still very good? So my wife, God bless her, has come on the ride with me. And she said by a certain birth milestone, I won't tell you that because that'll be a divorce, that she would like to be in her principal place of residence because we reinvest. And it kills me the fact I've got to buy my own home. I'd rather rent, but that's what she wants. And
sounds like a first world problem.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. But, there's also a very good lesson here with rent investing. Everyone talks about it. I've done it. And I can tell you now, it works a charm. Obviously, you don't go and rent something that's going to cost you a mint, but you have to use your money properly. And to be honest, once you understand the language of money, which I don't teach you on Netflix, whoever's at school, you have to actually put in the time. But once you learn the language of money, especially with property, it's obtainable. I mean, if you look at my properties, most of them are under 250 grand.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder maybe for a lot of our listeners that often they've got blinkers on. They think that investing in property means buying property in Sydney and Melbourne where your median price has come back a bit, to be fair, but it's still around $1 million, right? Like, there is other parts of Australia which have good assets, which are absolutely investable. And you've done well in sort of broadening your mindset, your reach by leveraging a buyer's agent. So that's smart business and allows you to do what you do.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at my investment, we get net, I get about 180 grand a year.
So this is a really important point. So we spoke about $4 million in value, about 1.7-ish, I think we said, in debt. So a lot of equity there, but we haven't spoken about how much money's in your back pocket. Yeah. So you're getting another family wage, really, paid for by your investment property.
Absolutely. Like if you take out earnings before tax and interest, you're up to, you potentially there's $160,000, $180,000 there. I mean, for what? What am I doing?
Hope you got a good accountant.
That's another point, actually. You have to get people that work with you. And most accountants work for themselves, whereas I've got an accountant now that works with me. But most of my properties, apart from the student accommodation, are in 2 trusts.
Okay.
Yeah. So
you're 180K. You're 180K positive, even though you have your property sitting in trust and you're paying, you're not going to be getting, it depends where they are really, but like land tax breaks and all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah. So basically, thank God my wife's around so I can push some of the income to her, and that's the beauty about a trust. But that's how I've set them up. But that's how I learned how to set them up with my parents. Yeah.
Well, there you go. And good financial discipline starts at home. And I think you're very fortunate, Paolo, that you're from a property family, starting with your grandfather sort of coming out of Italy after the war and building out a really nice portfolio. So, mate, well done. We should be proud. And it sounds as though even though you're probably, your old man's got a few properties, you've gone down your own pathway and your own journey and built out your own capability. So, and it sounds as though it's not a story that's going to end right here. So as you keep building on this and doing what you're doing, mate, come back and have a yarn to us.
I'd love that. Yeah, no, I appreciate the time. And again, look, I know Paul's on the other end, but it's not like that for me. As I said, we have a good relationship. I ring him all the time. We have a yarn. The buyer's agents make a good buyer's agent. It's worth its weight in gold. Yeah,
I completely agree. And well, thanks for sharing that relationship with all our listeners. Paolo and Paul, thanks for coming on, mate. You've been a bit quiet today deliberately. The talent today was Paolo, and I think a really good insight into how you can go about doing this stuff. And you talk about it sounds all very simple, but no doubt there's a lot of hard work that goes behind the scenes for Paolo and also for Paul. So we'll do more of these discussions. That's Paul Glossop from Pure Property Investment and Paolo Francestini, a man who invests in property. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. Remember to check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Smart Property HQ is where you'll find us on the social media. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
Have you signed up to HR Leader? Go to hrleader.com.au to subscribe. Receive the latest HR and people leadership insights and news.